we discuss and respond to Baltimore think tank Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle in their contention that Baltimore's ills result from the economic monopoly of white-owned and controlled entities. Next, we dive into MLB's decision to move the All-Star game from Georgia because they believe the new Georgia voting law bill disproportionately disenfranchises the black community.
It is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
And it used to be issues like lower taxes, better education, and safer streets that politicians use to get elected. Now, racism. We discuss whether attacks of racism are valid or just used to garner votes.
They sent all these letters out in the black community to discourage them from voting.
And lastly, move over, Grandma. Vermont grants preferential vaccine access effective April 1st to the BIPOC community and anyone living in their households.
Health officials say there's still a 13% racial gap between vaccinated white Vermonters versus BIPOC Vermonters.
Pop and Politics.
Welcome to Pop and Politics, a show that highlights trending political news and pop culture. Each week, the ladies get together like girlfriends do to chat about the biggest local and national news stories. They all have varying backgrounds and personalities. One thing they share in common is they all lean on the conservative end of the political spectrum. Meet the ladies. KJ, T, Xandria, Shelly E, Hanalyn. Smart, edgy, and conservative. This is Pop and Politics. Let's get started.
Good evening, and welcome to Pop and Politics. We're back. If you are watching on Facebook, please like this and share it. Also comment. We are going to be checking the comments throughout the show, and we would love to respond to those comments. So again, please comment, ask your questions, and join us. Become our fifth host tonight. If you're watching on YouTube, again, please subscribe. We love the subscribers. It helps to grow our platform. And also, if you do subscribe, you get alerted when we go live or when we post new videos. All right, tonight we are missing one host, T. She is away. She'll be away now for the next 2 weeks, but we miss her and we welcome her when she comes back. But we are joined today by political analyst Melik Abdul. Hi, Melik. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. What a great intro.
Okay.
I love that.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so we will get right into it. We'll start off this evening with talking about the MLB pulling out of Georgia. So just to give everyone a little feedback on it, MLB's decision to pull out of Atlanta came after President Joe Biden said during an interview last week that he would strongly support the decision to pull out of Atlanta. So President Biden is initiating the removal of jobs from so that's what he said. He would pull out from Atlanta. This is due to the strike, the voters. The bill, the Georgia-Atlanta bill, voters bill, and he supported that and said that the MLB should pull out of that.
I keep getting tongue-tied on the bill because I keep in my head, this is how successful the propaganda has been, I keep in my head calling it the Georgia voter suppression bill when it does nothing of the kind, when it actually expands voting. But in my head, it's so ingrained even in my thinking to refer to it as the voter suppression bill, even though that's completely false, which I know Melik he did a video about this debunking 5 of the myths about it. So yeah, I get tongue-tied on what the actual bill is.
Right. So Melik, what's myth number 1?
Well, actually, there's been, of course, a lot of disinformation about the law itself, But I said that why not start with what we had been talking about in the media? Remember, when this first came out, I think it was not this past Friday, but the Friday before last, where there was a lot of discussion, and most of what we heard about voter suppression was they banned people from giving water.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it was really because of that, I said to myself, well, let me do a little digging to just read and see what the law says myself. Typically, when I hear something on the news, and here I am, I'm doing media saying that I don't always trust what I'm hearing in media. But the reason that I say that is that I always encourage people to research things for themselves. So if you hear, don't just listen to me say it. Don't listen just to you guys say it. Go and research it yourself. So I always start with a reference saying, well, hey, here's the reference. And the reference is the actual Georgia law.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So about this whole water, giving food and water thing, what that actually is referencing is this thing called line warming. In campaigns, line warming is when you essentially hand out food, water, gifts, and other things like that in the poll to people standing in line. The ironic thing about this line warming or this ban on water is that I've often asked people, when you look at the legislation itself, it says a distance within 150 feet.
150 feet, you're right.
So what happens at 160 feet?
You can set up a table, you can set up a drink station, whatever you want.
But Melik, I wanted to say, I noticed that a lot of legislation, when it's in the media narrative, a lot of it, not just legislation, but a lot of the left uses a lot of food and water issues to hook, if you will, the people that they think rely on these things for sustenance. So I think it's very contemptible. It's a way to me to, in a sense, to mock those people because they think that all they can give them or all they need is some food and water, and that will do the trick for them.
Yeah, so that whole food and water thing. Now, it's not every voter or even in every state, do you have people standing in line, getting food and water, wanting food and water for that matter. In Georgia, if you wanted to stand in line and order Domino's pizza, you can actually do that yourself. The thing is that, so imagine a big MAGA bus or an NRA bus or any of those. They're popping up at a at a polling place. What the new law says is that you can't get off of that bus yourself and start handing out food and water and gifts to people standing in line. But what you can do is if you have water, then you can give that to the poll worker, and the poll worker will establish a general receptacle so people can actually do that for itself. And you actually just made a very good point about how these things are portrayed in media. Oftentimes, there's a lot of manipulation that goes on in the media. I'll do a quick segue and talk about the police reform bill last year. Most people don't realize that Democrats agreed with about 97% of what was in the GOP police reform bill, with the exception of the ban on chokeholds and the qualified immunity. You would be led to believe that the Democrats rejected the Republican bill because there were things in the Republican bill that Democrats just could not stomach. The narrative in the media is that Republicans were refusing to concede to things that Democrats wanted. And as far as history is judging it, Republicans are responsible for not passing a police reform bill when it was Democrats who blocked the Republicans' bill from coming up on a procedural vote. Democrats did that. And I don't want to get all into, because I know we're here to talk about the Georgia law, but this is all part of the manipulation that I talk about in media. So someone, and I'll even say, someone says something, some credible source on Black Twitter says something. Everybody believes it. Some credible source on, in liberal, just mainstream media says something. Everybody believes it. Joe Biden, which is why Joe Biden was able to say that this was a modern day Jim Crow. He hadn't read the bill. The people around him hadn't read the bill. The only thing that they did, they read headlines. And so you saw stuff that said, Republicans are now forcing Georgia voters to show an ID when they vote. Well, they've been able to do that they've been required to do that since 2005.
Right.
And Georgia provides free ID. They provide free state ID.
Well, and so my sister and I were talking the other day, and she recently posted this, so I'm going to borrow it from her, but she was like, how is it voter suppression all of the sudden when you need an ID, or how is it racial suppression all of a sudden when you need an ID to vote? When you need an ID to buy alcohol, you can't, the Major League Baseball, once you're in there, if you want to buy alcohol, you need an ID.
Well, you need an ID to pick up your tickets from will call.
Yes.
Delta has also come out with their woke statement.
You need an ID to fly.
You need an ID to fly. Yeah, and Coca-Cola, they require an ID for stakeholders to get into their board meetings.
To their buildings.
If you go to the hospital,
employees,
you need an ID. If you go to the club, I used this example last week, but all these people complaining about not being able to have water or whatever, I'm sure they've waited in like a 3-hour line long to get into a club, where then at the door they need an ID.
Well, and also nothing prevents you from bringing your own water. The bottom line about that is, why are the lines so long in the first place?
And they're in Democratic strongholds.
Yes,
so why are the lines so long?
Which Governor Kemp pointed out, that it's all of these Democratic counties, these Democratic voting, areas, precincts, where they're experiencing these long lines.
Why?
So fix the problem, open up more precincts, or fix the problem, open up more polling places, or fix whatever the underlying problem is that is causing this breakdown in the voting system to begin with.
And you know what? And can I actually say, to your point about fixing the problem, the Georgia law fixes the problem of long lines, because what it now does is give authority to local areas where they can actually decide now if you're waiting in line, and all of this is based on the previous election cycle. If you're waiting in line longer than an hour, now Georgia state officials have resources to be able to move polling places and or equipment to satisfy increases in, the people who are waiting in line. There are things that the law actually did that people don't realize. In the state of Maryland, there's this thing, this whole thing that they're talking about, voter suppression, because they took away, the X number of absentee ballot boxes. Prior to last year, very few states had drop boxes.
It was a COVID initiative.
It was the reason that they installed the drop boxes is to accommodate not being able to vote in person. In the state of Maryland, prior to the pandemic, I think Maryland had roughly in the entire state, maybe about 79 or so ballot drop boxes. 79. What counties did, and which is what they're able to do, what counties did, they requested from the state additional ballot boxes. And I think Maryland ended up with about maybe 200 or so ballot boxes. Those ballot boxes won't be there in 2022 or 2024 simply because we're not dealing with the same pandemic. Well, we hopefully won't be dealing with the same pandemic where people cannot vote in person. Most people still mail their absentee ballots in.
And let me change gears a little. Yes, and let me change gears, because let's talk about the fallout. So now they've moved the All-Star game to Colorado. And just to go through some of Colorado's voting requirements, they do require ID for in-person voting. Early voting is 15 days prior to the election. Poll times from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And incarcerated felons are disenfranchised.
And I think they also prohibit electioneering by providing food and water.
And not only that, but you've moved it now
to a state who has more stringent. Sounds like it.
And not only that, but the whole thing was, discrimination. We've moved it from Georgia, which had a much larger population of African Americans. The money that they were going to get in Cobb County, they're not getting it now, to a place where you have much fewer.
Well, they moved it. Atlanta has a population that is more than 50% black. They moved it to Denver, which has a population that is less than 10% black, all in the name of racial equity. And what the tourism official for Cobb County has said is that it will cost the county $100 million.
That's
about it, at a time when they're coming out of the economic devastation of the pandemic.
I think this is all a shell game. I think this was all a shell game. They're using this particular law now, or this bill, as a front, as a cover to move them out of the Atlanta area to go to Colorado. I think these MLB and NFL teams with these stadiums and all of this, the rigmarole that goes on with getting the city to pay, the taxpayers really to pay for the stadiums, and then they get a new one. I think this is all part of that larger game. That's what I think it is.
I see what you're saying.
And this timing of it just happens to be in the middle of a scamdemic.
Well, once
it's
again,
really goofy too, because Georgia's made up of, I mean, it's like an attack on conservatives or whatever, right, in Georgia. But Georgia's made up of people on both sides.
Right.
So what you're taking away now from like people that have put money into their box seat tickets or whatever tickets that they have, like it really is a scam on
Well,
them.
it's really going to devastate the local economy and these small business owners who are relying on this. The USA Today sports editor, Mike Freeman, he's encouraging all major league sports to disinvest from Georgia because of the law. And he said, it is true that such boycotts would financially impact some working people of Atlanta, like concession stand workers and businesses that thrive off the crowds attending the games. But those same people are having their access to voting diminished with a bevy of suppression laws. So again, these woke leftists who are excusing actual harm, like the outcome of
where it really matters. Where it really matters, they're ignoring that. They're ignoring that where it really matters. So now you're going to have,
for the sake of ideology and agenda.
This is what they do, though.
Exactly.
This is a small picture of what the Democratic Party does.
Exactly.
But you know what this is called? You know what this, so what we're talking about is virtue signaling.
Yes.
MLB is virtue signaling. So they're saying well, look, we're concerned about racial justice and everything. So let's go ahead and just take one for the team. And no, that's really not how it works when it comes to virtual. Remember right after the George Floyd protests, we had here in DC where our mayor painted Black Lives Matter on the street, because it was on the street leading to the White House.
Yes.
Well, the thing is that the realities on the ground have not changed for Black people or any Black and brown person in DC since they painted that on the ground. Remember, there was the NBA teams, the NFL, they wanted to play the Black national anthem before the first game, during the first week of games last year, paint, shirts where they're supporting Breonna Taylor, or all of that is virtue signaling, but it does nothing to deal with the actual problem. And too often, for conservatives, we give way too much ground when it comes to media. And so we kind of feed into, because we don't, it's kind of like, and I'll give just a very quick example. It's kind of like this whole thing, the Trump Charlottesville comments. Now, we know what Trump actually said, but a lot of us were uncomfortable having that conversation saying, okay, I don't necessarily agree with the context where he used it, but hey, this is actually what he said. I don't necessarily agree with him when he was saying that COVID is now the Democrats' next hoax, but that's what he said. He didn't say that COVID was a hoax. So there were so many things where we kind of concede ground and say, oh, well, where we're pressured by all of our liberal friends who on no occasion ever come fight for conservatives. We will fight for our liberal friends, but our conservative friends, we can be attacked in media. We can be attacked all across social media. Our liberal friends don't come to us and say, will come and defend us saying, hey, I know him, I know her, cut that out. But we will do it.
You are so right. You are so right.
Well, and Melik, you mentioned that the realities have not changed. They're doing all of this virtue signaling and this performative justice, and the problems have not been fixed. But in this particular case, the problem is manufactured. The problem is fabricated. So they're using the trope. They're using this, the hysteria around race and the history of voter suppression in the South. And they are trying to create the same narrative as if this is going on today, like Biden said that it's Jim Crow 2.0. And yet he was given 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post fact check. Finally, they actually fact checked him and said he was blatantly lying about it.
So, Melik, I have a question.
They're hurting the people, as Hanalyn mentioned. They're hurting the people they're claiming to help.
So this happens a lot in the media, particularly in urban areas where they exploit these people, these issues. So then my question would be, at what point will the people, the majority of the people in these areas, at what point do they start putting or connecting the dots? Because the patterns are there.
Yeah. So this is, I call it a Gordian knot, because it's a very difficult problem to actually solve. Because the thing is that on the conservative side, many times in our messaging, we're not offering them anything. So we double down on some of the racial language or pushing narratives that we know not true. I said, as someone who supports Donald Trump even to this day, I said what I'm not going to do is to use my platform to push anything about the Donald Trump losing the election because of voter fraud or people out. I wasn't going to do that. But we lose our audience when we go down these rabbit holes and don't pull back. So a lot of this work that we're doing, like, I think it is great what you ladies are doing, because you're not just entertaining, but you're informative. And I think that the more that we focus on trying to inform these communities rather than insult them, talking about that you're on a plantation or some of these other tropes, racial tropes that we actually use to describe, Black and brown communities, or even women for that matter. We have to start being more responsible in how we message it. And I think that you ladies are doing great things. I think as a prime example of someone who was out there doing the work, showing I wasn't just, supportive of Donald Trump. I wasn't just, I didn't have just the support from his team. It's Kim Klacik. Because what Kim Klacik is out there doing, she could have folded her hands and gone out and probably made herself plenty of money without beating the pavement trying to get conservative candidates elected into office. That's her mission. That's her mission right there. And so what we need to do is realize that there is no one way to actually do this. We need to combine our efforts and realize that, hey, you may be good at this. So we're going to support you in that effort in doing this. But too many times, especially with conservatives, as I found, is that we we put ourselves into these boxes where, you can't get in, where we have people who stand at the gate and say, you can't get in. And so it requires us to, with platforms just like this, to get our own message out there, because we are part of the community.
Exactly.
We are the community. We haven't gone anywhere. We are the community. So the more that we get out and get our messages out, be mindful of not just what we say, but how we say it. That's important, because at the end of the day, people have to like you before they listen to you.
That's right.
I agree with that. I was just going to add, I do think it's really sad. We have these major multi-million corporations and all these organizations that are speaking on behalf of the people. But there's a disconnect between them and the people. They are not on that floor. They are not the vendors outside.
Well, also the people voted.
Right. And
people voted for the legislature that passed this law.
Right. Corporations don't get to vote in the legislature where the people's ballot boxes are. That's for the people. So in a sense, since the people voted, Coca-Cola and MLB and Delta are really usurping the votes.
Yeah. It's a bullying tactic.
Yeah.
It's a concerted, coordinated effort between media, corporations, and a major political party to exert undue influence and pressure on elected officials within a state in order to, like you said, to basically to usurp the will of the people.
Yeah. I think this is going to backfire, though. I do. Because they've done this so many times. I think people are starting to wake up, and especially with baseball. I mean, people got upset about this.
I saw so many people, though, sharing those same just thoughtless memes. And Malik, like you said, where so many people are just retweeting some random person on Twitter, sharing some random meme. I look at memes that are shared and I'm going, people are sharing them as if they're sharing facts, as if they're sharing sourced material. And I'm going, you don't even know where this means. Some random person made a meme that says, "Oh, Republicans want people to starve in line," and I'm like, what? It's like people have completely logical people that I know, rational, reasonable people are sharing these things without even questioning them, without even doing their own research. Which the narrative is so ridiculous. The idea, like you talked about, the thing that was so ridiculous about it is this claim that you're denying people food and water in line. That just at face value, you can look at that and go, Okay, well, that's not true. That doesn't make sense. Well, why can't someone bring
Not
their own
only is it
bottle?
not true,
And they're just sharing the memes.
Well, you mentioned Kim. All of us, we campaigned for Kim this year, right? And we were at the voting polls, the voting booths, whatever you call it. So, like, there were rules. You could not go into the polls at a certain distance if you were wearing a shirt or holding a sign that was for Kim. How is that any different?
Half the people's never even worked at polls.
Exactly.
People you hear them talking about this and talking about that. They have never worked in a poll. They've never worked as an election judge. They don't even know the ins and outs about it. They're just, again, like you mentioned, they're just reposting these fake news, fake tweets, fake memes. I was talking to someone today, and we were talking about something else, and she fact-checked me on something else that had nothing to do with this. So then I said to her, well, since you fact-checking, I hope you looked into this voter bill. And I said, you realize that your president lied. And she said, oh, girl, please.
I see that. They won't even engage when we try to actually have a reasonable discussion. They won't. I have a friend like that too, and she'll say something, some kind of hyperbolic claim and like paranoid claim, and then I will refute it with facts, and she'll go, well, I can see that this conversation isn't going anywhere. I said to her one time, I said, well, yes, you always shut down the conversation when I provide you facts. You don't want to have a discussion.
Hey, you have to love the fact checkers that are like, this is 1/7 incorrect.
Right. When I go to vote, this is why I find particularly this food and water hook so detestable, because to me it would make me think or feel that I have to rely on you to supply my water to go vote. How low do you think of me? So even when I go to vote now, I don't even take literature from the poll workers passing out the literature, and I have a stand. No, I don't need your literature, and don't tell me who to vote for. And they're like, oh wow, I don't want you rushing me to tell me on the day of the election, oh, vote for this person, vote for. First of all, no, you don't get to tell me who to vote for, and I don't want your literature, period.
But Shelly, that's another topic, but that is that's an issue in
mindset
itself.
To me.
But it's an issue in itself because we have so many people going to the polls uninformed. They're going to vote, but they're just standing there and just like kind of voting by rote. Like they don't even know who and what happens. And what we saw at the polls was that people would come along with the Democratic slate, and they would tell people who you need to vote for this person, this person, this person, because they're on the Democrat slate. And remember, Democrats are on your side because they're not the racist Republicans. And people have that impression in their mind that they do not challenge. And when I would go and talk to people and I talk about, and Eugene Boycott, and District 12, and he's this and that, and people would say, oh my God, he sounds amazing. I want to vote for this guy. And then they look at the slate and they would say, well, but he's not on my list of approved candidates, so I can't.
See, that's that same
people are
mindset to me.
And they capitalize on that and they exploit that by going and just handing them the literature with the same old tropes and the same old canards that they're peddling, and people aren't doing their own independent research.
And well, we'll end it on that. I hate that we got to move on.
I was just going to say it is an insult to individuals, if they want to call them individuals of color. It is an insult to them at the end of the day. What is going on?
It is. And on that note, we will move on. Before we go, Melik, can you just share any way our viewers can reach you, or any things you'd like to talk about as far as how people can find you?
Well, first of all, thanks again. I think this is a great conversation. You guys need to keep this going. I support you 100%. I will make it easy and I will say something. I will actually announce the soft launch of my website.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Exclusive.
So I haven't said it. I haven't announced it yet because I'm still working on it. There are some kinks that I need to get out. But you can actually find me and all of my contact information, my social media on melikabdul.com.
Very good.
All right,
Thank you,
and please, all of our viewers, go to his website, go to find him on YouTube, subscribe. You will be in for a treat. Factual information, entertaining information, so definitely go support.
Thank you, Melik.
Thank you. All right, so we are moving right along. Shelly, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so Baltimore. We are talking about the Mosbys, but from a little different angle, I guess I would say. So last week there was an article placed by the leaders of A Beautiful Struggle, an organization in Baltimore City, and they make no claims about it. They support Marilyn Mosby, and I guess Nick Mosby by extension. But their article was basically an attack on the Baltimore Brew. So, and I forget the name of the article. I have it right here somewhere in my paperwork. But the name of it basically said the Baltimore Brew is a white supremacist organization.
It's a newspaper. Tool of white supremacy.
A tool of white supremacy, yes. So in that article, which was pretty long, and it was written by Adam Jackson.
Right, Adam Jackson, I believe Davon Love.
Okay, and they're the two leaders of leaders of a beautiful struggle. So in that article, there were some major themes that I pulled out, and that we can talk about, of course. So the number one theme that I pulled out of that article was that blacks, like the Mosbys, who are in power, they are frequently or more often called out for corruption more than white people, and the main reason is because of white supremacy. That's number one. Go figure. Number two was that blacks in power, they are a threat to white establishments. See, Adam Jackson's article, he has these points, and he leads up to his conclusion, basically, is that Baltimore is run by these white establishments, even though they have black people in front, the ones that we may see, the CEOs or the executives, but the boards and the trustees are made up of almost all white people, and they are running the city. So it left me with some questions. He named corporations such as Johns Hopkins University and the medical institution, the University System of Maryland, which is the education component, if you will, and the Greater Baltimore Committee, not to mention the ABLE Foundation. The ABLE Foundation is a huge philanthropic organization that sponsors so many events and other charities and nonprofits in and throughout Baltimore City and the region. His conclusion was a little circular, and we were talking about this.
Yeah.
We were talking about this because he said that even though Baltimore is majority black, Baltimore only has about 22% black-owned businesses. So the question I had was, well, if the Mosbys are now entering this fore as a political power, supposedly representing black people, then are they puppets? Or are they within their own power?
Well, that's why he says that's why they're being attacked. That's why he says there's this witch hunt against them to criminalize them or to cast them in a criminal light. It's because they are the only politicians that are in Baltimore that are not puppets of the white establishment.
But that's kind of confusing because they're sponsored by, he said in this article that they were sponsored by these activists, mostly white organizations that they are sponsored by, and that was their one critic, according to Adam Jackson. The one criticism is that the Mosbys don't speak to the working class people of Baltimore. So then who are they representing?
I don't know, but I just thought his conclusion that they were the ones that were, that were not cat's paws of the white establishment. That what an insult to every other black political leader in Baltimore. But Brandon Scott's going like, what? What the heck?
I mean, so basically, the Mosbys are the power couple or the powerful people in Baltimore. Are the Mosbys the ones that really run the city?
Let me one thing he said that struck me. He says, in other words, white people are funding white institutions to hire black people to perpetuate industries that are sustained by black suffering. So again, his contention is that there is a white monopoly or white cabal behind everything, and is a puppet master to these black politicians.
So are the Mosbys puppets?
Right.
So that's what I
did. The systematic racism. But in Baltimore, then they should be tying that to the fact that it's Democratic leadership.
And it's a majority black.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he said. No, he said yes, the majority of the leadership is black. However, they are actually being financed and run by this white entity. So then another question, then if that's the case, then we are rightful to criticize the Mosbys on the metrics of particularly Marilyn Mosby. Her main metric should be prosecuting crime.
Yeah.
So are we allowed to criticize them or her on that or not? Because his article, I wasn't clear when I read the article. Which is it? Is she a puppet? Is she a power player? Is she a prosecutor representing the people of Baltimore? Which is it?
Well, his contention
win.
Seems to be that no matter what you you do if you criticize a black elected official, that you are criticizing them because of some deep-seated racism that you have. Like, he said that he really focused in on Bob Embry, who's the president of the Able Foundation, and he said that he's a major funder of the Baltimore Brew, which is the independent newspaper that has been doing the investigative reporting. And yeah, he said to Embry's network, so the networks of of people that he is influencing, the people that support him, the people who think like him, right? The people who are white supremacists and white adjacent, because he uses that term white adjacent as well to describe black politicians who are complicit in the system, and he calls them white adjacent. So he said to Embry's networks, the Mosbys represent the empowerment of working class black people that they find to be inherently pathological and inferior. Mosby represents the political defiance of Embry's networks that few black elected officials exercise, and the Baltimore Brew is an instrument of these white power networks' ability to curate social justice activity in a way that leaves their power untouched. I mean, you're just imputing motive to people that you do not know. And others. That anyone who criticizes Marilyn Mosby or takes a look at her record in the state's attorney's office with a critical eye, that they believe that black people are inherently pathological.
Well, then I had another question when I read that. If that's the case, then who's sponsoring Mosby? Who are her funders?
Well,
George Soros.
He said that these are
a white billionaire.
He said that. He said again. He said she is being funded by a white patriarch, or
but he didn't. He wasn't making the point that these organizations that he mentioned. He was basically saying these organizations are the economic engine of Baltimore City, and they have a lot of power, if you will. They have a lot of leverage in the city. Well, these organizations that he named, they are the top employers in Baltimore City. Johns Hopkins, University System of Maryland, or University of Maryland in general.
They're the only economic drivers in the city.
Which Baltimore needs.
Yes.
So their trustees and their boards do have the right to guide their companies, and as far as driving the economic engine of Baltimore. If these companies left Baltimore, I don't care who they're run by, white people, black people, but if these companies pulled out, Baltimoreans would be so out of luck. I mean, not even out of luck. They would be so up the creek without a canoe, without a paddle.
Let me just say this. So my question was, if he's saying that the Embrys are bad, he's saying the brew is bad, and then he's also saying, I mean, basically right now, Baltimore is failing.
Right.
It's not thriving. Exactly. It's failing. So then who does he want in power? Who does he
Mosby because she's black?
What is his solution?
But she is in power. But he's saying she's being
well, he said she's the one challenging the system.
Yeah.
And this is and that's the claim that the Mosbys. That's the claim that the Mosbys themselves made. That's the claim that her attorney made when he said it was a political witch hunt because these were two powerful black progressive agents of change. Right. So again, this is what they're being billed as. There's this whole kind of like mystique or this legend being built around them that she's this great reformer in Baltimore, this progressive advocate, who's going to tear down the
systems. Really hurting black people even more.
Yes, they are.
And not to mention these corporations that he named, whether or not you agree with their mission or whatever, their value system, they do a whole lot of good for Baltimore City. The Able Foundation gives money and support to a slew of organizations.
And all within Baltimore.
Yes, Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland. They employ half or more of the city. Well, so there's a lot of good there.
Who is he going to have to replace them if he doesn't want them in the
that was my question.
Who's he bringing in?
Well, it seemed like there was kind of a call. There was kind of this coded, like Marxist call for redistribution of wealth, because when he points out the disparity in the wealth and who owns the businesses, he says Baltimore is a majority black city, but only 22% of the businesses are black owned, and he concludes that paragraph by saying what is needed is to transfer power and wealth into the hands of independent black formations that are accountable to the masses of black people. It's a call for redistribution of wealth. And because what you can't just look at the outcome of a situation and be able to determine what were the factors that created that situation. So 22% of businesses are black owned. Well, what is the education level of the black communities in Baltimore? Right. What is the demographic of the households? You've got 70% of black children being raised by single mother households. That has a direct impact on poverty and crime. A direct correlation.
Well, this is what, and this is why the Democrat Party does Black people such a disservice, because any problem, any struggle that we go through in urban centers, they push towards it's racism.
Exactly.
Instead of getting to the root cause of these issues. So again, we always go through this circular motion of pushing everything at racism.
Yeah.
It's not racism. We never get to the root cause of this stuff, and nothing gets solved.
I mean, look at the failure of the schools.
From the outside to help you or not.
Yes, and then you look at the failure of the schools, right? Think about like at Augusta Fells, and you've got half of the kids are failing with a 0.13 grade point average.
Considered acceptable.
And do you think that they're going to be able to graduate, if they can even graduate, with marketable skills to be able to go and to work and to learn a trade and to understand business? But to work their way up to the point where they can start a business? This is the reason why Black Baltimoreans have a lower rate of business ownership, because they're not being given the tools, and because there are problems that stem from the makeup of the households, of the family households, right? So you're missing so many other components that are factors in success, and then you're just looking at this unequal outcome and claiming that the reason for it is racism or discrimination, instead of, like you said, looking at what are the root causes and being able to solve the problem.
When a Black person commits a crime, this is Adam Jackson in the article, when a Black person commits a crime, it is often attributed to their Blackness.
Well, Xandria's going to go into that one.
Well, you are, but I mean, but again, it's the trauma of low expectations. Right? There's no, Black people should have no standards, if you will, or we cannot impose standards on them for culture, for work ethic, for education, because doing so means that you are, what is it, white adjacent? White adjacent, and you're normalizing whiteness. So you're making them out to live up to the white man's standard.
Well, the other thing that he doesn't say is, he says only 22% of the businesses are Black owned, but he doesn't say how many businesses are owned by Asians or other ethnic groups, Pakistanis, all these other ethnic groups that are successful.
Not to mention the ethnic breakdown of the businesses, but how about how much it costs to even start a business in Baltimore City? Because those are some disincentives to people starting businesses and maintaining them. When you add up the cost to get the licenses and all of the different fees, well, they are cost prohibitive to a lot of people.
Yes.
Plus, they might get burglarized.
Well,
that's what you said.
Well, and now you've got Marilyn Mosby, who's going to refuse to prosecute trespassing, drug possession, prostitution, urination, defecation.
Who
wants a business where you've got someone defecating in front of your business and trespassing, and you can't call the police to have them
hose it
removed?
down every day?
So I did a panel last week of conservative women, and Europe C. Morgan was on the show, and I remember, and Kim as well, and Lily Chen and Dolores Reyes. And so I remember Europsy was telling the story about how they were bringing these investors into the city, to buy these, I think it was properties, right? And then as they're there, their car gets
they got robbed.
They got robbed. So it's like, why am I going to come in for that? You know what I mean? Look, so, and the other thing that doesn't really make sense is that it's like you can't. All these Democrats, they want all these different things, but like you can't have it both ways. You're either all in or you're all out, and that'll relate to my topic as well. But like, okay, they want a redistribution of wealth, but they don't want money going from white or non-Black donors to organizations that support people of color. Like, isn't that another way of distribution of wealth? It just doesn't.
It's illogical.
I don't know. Are the Mosbys redistributing their wealth?
Right,
and their wealth is mostly from government, taxpayer funded.
So they're redistributing it to Florida real estate markets.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have invited Adam Jackson and leaders of A Beautiful Struggle on, and they have accepted. So they will be here next week, next Wednesday at 8 p.m. And we are willing to give them as much time as we can to go through this, because we want answers. We want
we want to hear from them.
We want an intelligent discussion regarding this, because I'll be honest, I've followed leaders of A Beautiful Struggle for years. I do believe they do a lot for the community. I don't agree with their political standpoints, right?
I like the idea behind their organization.
Yeah,
well, I think they've fallen into the same rut of thinking that is really disempowering to Black people by claiming that Black people have no power or agency.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this article is so insulting to all of the Black voters and Black elected officials in Baltimore to say you have no agency, white people are controlling you, and it's the same white fragility narrative that Robin DiAngelo pushes from this critical race theory perspective, where she actually says white people have control over every Black person in their orbit, and it is such an insulting racist narrative.
I think when people start and the community stops focusing on race and actually starts.
But how do we get them to do that? I mean, I'm not saying you have an answer.
Right. This is the thing. Everything is related to race. No, it's really not. There are issues that can be fixed within the societies that are not related to race.
I feel like
as soon as people create that, separation.
As soon as people realize that their economic wealth and their economic future is way more important, hopefully that may be the light bulb.
Well, we'll end it on there. I'm really looking forward to this next week, talking about it. And we want to say, we do understand, I can speak for myself, racism is real. Discrimination is real. And so we're not saying this doesn't exist. It does exist. But the level that Democrats, the left, and a lot of people say that it affects urban communities, it's not. It's
permeating every aspect.
It becomes a vast conspiracy.
Right. It becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
It becomes meaningless when everything is racist, then nothing really is.
And also again, I say disempowering, because what you're telling people is no matter what you do, white people will always succeed because they're more powerful than you are. So then why even try? I mean, how disheartening is that?
Well, we'll move on to Xandria. What do you have for us this week?
What was the segue?
A large topic, yes. Okay, so of course we know that the media is biased. That's been a thing forever.
Right.
But there's been a lot of really tragic incidents that have occurred lately, and all are really sad. But what is really alarming is the way the media selectively brings up race as a topic of discussion for some of these incidents and not all, right? It's, again, you either go all in or you go all out. You either make every incident about race and constantly bring up everybody's race every time something happens, or don't bring it up at all. And really, they shouldn't bring it up at all, because race has not been related to any of these incidents that have happened.
Yes.
So I'm going to go through a few of the main examples I wanted to mention. But first of all, we had on March 24th, 2 teenage girls attacked an Uber driver in Washington, D.C. So I gathered all these different headlines from various news stations, and every time, teen girls charged with murder, right? Girls ages, 12 and 15, 13 and 15. They never once discuss the ethnicities of these individuals, or they have completely failed, or they are hiding their names from the public.
Well, let me just jump in, because for a while there, several years ago, it was this big issue about the media and people saying someone's race, because a lot of the crimes were being committed by African Americans, and so people would get upset, specifically the African American community. I actually was one of them, where you don't have to always mention someone's race. But now it's kind of twisted. It's gone the direct opposite.
Well, the problem is, in this case, I don't think they should have mentioned race. I agree that they shouldn't mention race, but if you're not going to do it for some situations,
then don't do it for
why are you going to do it? Right now, the only time race is discussed every time it's a white male. They have to create it. They have to push this narrative of white supremacy is taking over. They blame everything on white supremacy. But what you'll see with all these examples is when you juxtaposition, or favorite word, the narrative doesn't make sense, and any time that the facts are going against their narrative, they push this racism theme to keep their story going and hiding all the other contradictory details. So,
and just one quick point, they do it because it works.
You see it with the Georgia voter bill, with the voter suppression bill. It works.
It works.
It's a narrative that it's like, the third rail in American politics, and it just touches something. It just touches something that you have such a visceral reaction to it. Because America, for the most part, in this day and age, is largely... We are not a white supremacist country, right? People react to stories of injustice because they are opposed to it, which is why they can play on that narrative, because they're playing on people's innate sense of justice.
Well, look at George Floyd. They raised this huge issue. I don't know one person, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. I don't know anyone that looked at that video
they
literally said that it was okay.
We had one moment of unity amongst the world.
No, I remember it.
Everyone was appalled by it. And then all of a sudden,
they didn't let us be appalled. They didn't let us be appalled.
So let me point out a few hypocrisies about this particular incident, but what you said leads into some of the other cases. So, 2 teenage girls, I don't know if you saw the video. It's horrific. It's horrific. These girls carjacked this guy. This guy literally says, he's almost defending them to other people that were going to get involved. He's like, they're kids, okay?
While they're
carjacking him, they taser him, they get in his vehicle, and they start driving with him half out the car. And then they crash, and this guy is like a pole or something. I mean, it's terrible.
Crush him between
he's left on the pavement. All these people are watching instead of helping him, and this girl
the car turns over on the side, I think.
Yeah, the car turned over on the side, and this guy was thrown out. And this girl, instead of going after this man who is just flung to the ground, is worried about her phone being in the car.
She's basically stepping over his body, like
a dead man that they just murdered
to get her
human life. It's really
this
sad.
isn't the one though that the girls were doing a plea deal.
Yes, they got a plea deal.
So, here's the hypocrisy.
Because they're minors. Because they're minors, basically.
Essentially, the media is saying, we're not going to disclose our names because they're juveniles. They're minors. Okay, they did not think twice when it was the case of Kyle Rittenhouse or Nathan, what's his name? Nathan Sandman.
What about the bomber? What about the Philadelphia bomber? Was he underage? Remember the guy who bombed at the marathon?
I don't remember what
I remember his name.
The Boston Marathon?
Yeah, the Boston Marathon. He's in jail.
They were underage.
I knew they said his name.
They're keeping these girls safe from the public.
Yeah.
But okay, if you're gonna do that, and I agree, juveniles should not be named. Perhaps.
I think they should be.
Don't do it for anyone.
I think they should be. No, I agree with you what you're saying. They should, but I think they should be. If you are that, I don't know, crass, cruel, and able to do something to that degree, that horrific, your name should be splattered all over the headlines.
I mean, it was heinous.
The second hypocrisy
was just heinous.
Yeah, is that people always say, due process doesn't occur for black individuals. Well, these girls were arrested and they're going through due process now. They haven't been charged for anything. They haven't been charged? I mean, they've been charged.
They've been charged. The court trial hasn't played out yet.
It's probably not going to be a trial because they're getting a plea deal. They're not even going to have to serve jail time.
This man
going to some kind of juvenile facility, but it's not even it's not like a prison juvenile detention center.
It's for juveniles. They'll be out when they're 18 or 21, basically.
He's a Pakistani man. That's Southeastern Asia. Okay, where is
Stop Asian hate?
Right, where is the Asian
crimes
hate?
against Asian? Yeah,
it's insane, right? Meanwhile, remember when Nathan Sandman? Remember when his case blew up? Essentially, he was the boy wearing the MAGA hat with standing in front of the guy with the
the Catholic school boy.
Right. They made such a big deal about this. Guess what? No one was harmed in the making of that film. Literally, no one was harmed. He just had a
and it wasn't what they said it had. It wasn't the way it happened.
They threw his name all across the news.
They doxed him. They were giving, who was it? Kathy Griffin was giving out his name and address and telling people to go and attack him. He was a child. He was like 16 at the time.
These were the headlines for that. It said, white students in MAGA taunt Native American elders. Okay, that's race baiting.
Yeah.
So we have no race baiting here when the perpetrators are individuals of color. Right. They want to say that. But all of a sudden, when it's a white man, they do that. Same with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. People might disagree on whether they think he's innocent or guilty, but at the end of the day,
that was a clear-cut case of self-defense.
Yeah, I agree.
When you actually watch the videos and see what happened.
It was not a premeditated attack.
No.
These girls had a premeditated attack.
Yes.
But if you're looking
felony murder,
just at the headlines, the difference is they threw out his name. Yeah. He's underage and he's a white male versus this. So
and this is not justice.
Right.
No.
This is not justice.
No, it's called social justice.
It's not even social justice.
When you have to add the word anything to justice, it negates the justice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this guy.
So if you add, what is social justice versus justice? or what is any other kind of blank justice versus justice. So when you have to add something to justice, it really isn't justice.
Well, it's just like this restorative justice mode.
There you go. Another one.
Yeah,
Social
that the San
justice, restorative
Francisco
justice.
DA is following, and that's why there are these cases.
Which is not justice.
Well, in San Francisco, 85% of the physical assaults on Asians, 85% of the physical assaults, period, in San Francisco are by black perpetrators, and the majority of the victims are Asian. So this narrative that it's like white supremacists who are attacking Asians is patently false.
Well, they're going to mess around and get Charles Bronson justice.
But the DA is not prosecuting those cases because he says it's restorative justice because he doesn't want to prosecute black people. So there are black people attacking Asians and not being prosecuted.
But that might be what, unfortunately, hopefully, that might be what people eventually come to protect themselves and their families. They will take justice into their own hands. Particularly when we don't have a prosecutor who's prosecuting the crimes, and we have the media feeding the frenzy, if you will, feeding the beast. Eventually, it will come to people preserving themselves and their families and taking justice.
This is propaganda. This is pure propaganda.
The guy who was killed, unfortunately, his name is Muhammad Anwar, and he was 66 years old. He was a 7 to 8 year Pakistani American immigrant, right? So he came here for a better life, was working as an Uber driver to take care of his family, and these girls just.
Did you? I didn't hear 46 vice president. I didn't hear her talking about him being Asian.
So where was our Asian vice president? Oh, did you just say that?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Go hair.
I thought you said 46. I thought you were talking about Biden.
No, 46 VP.
Oh, okay, got it.
Well, what now? She's Asian.
Where's she talking about the Asian connection? Like you said,
media coverage.
She's supposed to be Asian now. I thought she was black.
Oh, she's
Indian.
I thought she was Asian now. No, there was a headline in the I think Washington Post or New York Times that came out with the Stop Asian Hate. They were like, why our Asian vice president can speak to their pain.
God.
So she's everything. She's a Kamala chameleon.
We will get to her niece soon too.
But
essentially, so this guy's friend, Goher Khan, he said that he didn't feel that the incident got enough coverage.
Of course it didn't.
And it really didn't. And so you mentioned
it disappears when it doesn't fit.
Now, wait a minute. And did you
mention?
I don't know if you mentioned that the mayor, I think it was the mayor of DC, basically came out with a public health or public service statement.
I saw that.
How to avoid being
carjacked.
Like, what the heck? What honor to that man's family?
So callous.
You know what I mean? It's really.
But she said it was She said it was something that was supposed to go out anyway.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, timing is everything.
Yeah, that's what she said.
But you mentioned the George Floyd incident. So the first headline that came out, let me pull it up, when that occurred was like white cop on black man's neck, right? And I'm trying to find the exact where I had it. But essentially, that was the headline that went everywhere. It was meant to stir emotion. It was meant to cause havoc.
Before people even knew the fact pattern in the case, before people even knew what happened. And like you said, most people, I was horrified when I saw that. But you still need to be able to look objectively at the facts of the case and find out what happened.
And then you find out, like, weeks or months later, that they had like a whole nation of the people that were there. One cop was black, one cop was Asian. Nobody even talked about that.
I never understood why people never talked about that, because you could see it in the video. What the heck?
Well, what about in the Freddie Gray, to bring it local, what about with Freddie Gray, where half the cops were black? And they're prosecuting, Mosby was prosecuting these police officers because she was trying to dismantle systemic racism. It was just prosecuting black cops.
Yes, they would have you believe all white cops were involved in that initially. Nationally, that was the narrative, or that's what you would have thought from the narrative, that they were only white cops.
Stopped to render him aid on the road, on the way to jail.
Right.
And going back to the Floyd incidents, of course, obviously we all think it was horrendous what happened. To this day, it has not been proven. There's no evidence that race had anything to do with that situation. But now juxtaposition this to the Capitol Police attack, right? So what have the headlines for that been? They have just literally said, like, suspect rams officer with car, essentially. I don't know if you saw the videos for that either.
I didn't see the video yet, but
really sad. So a man was in this car. He ran these two Capitol Police, got out after injuring one. Really, I think that killed him.
Yeah,
one
Billy Evans was the officer that was killed.
He was the officer that was killed, and there was another injured.
Lunged at another one with a knife.
Right, so he lunged at him with a knife, and then the guy shot back.
Islamic, right?
So he is. So they're not calling this a hate crime, but he was a follower of the Nation of Islam, and he said a lot of, like, his religious beliefs are are essentially what have centered him and like, you know what I mean? Like in the actions that he's taken in his life. It was his savior, stuff like that. So they may or may not,
that doesn't
right. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was a hate
But if it were a white guy who had done it with some kind of manifesto, he basically posted a manifesto, like that this was his like suicide mission or something. And if it had been a white man, it would have been all of these histrionic headlines about how, you know, white men are the greatest domestic terrorism threat in the country, and when it's someone who's black and from Nation of Islam, all of a sudden it's, why are we talking about race?
Where was the headline that says black individual kills white cop? I mean, that was never a headline.
No.
So, and again, I don't think race should be involved in this situation. I don't think they should have made race involved in the George Floyd situation, because they should have literally just said, exactly. That's the problem,
because it works. Well, let me ask you this though. So, just from a marketing standpoint, because when you think about the news, they're trying to get clickbait. Is that clickbait. But is that a response? Is that something substantial response to this, where they're saying, well, it may not be right for us to do this, but we're trying to get clicks?
Right. Well, I mean, it works.
Racism,
it gets them the clicks. It gets the.
There's a demand for it.
Yeah,
there's a demand for racism
but it's dishonest.
It is very dishonest.
Yeah. Again, they should. I just agree. Consistency is the key, right? If you're gonna do it for one, do it for all.
Well, also, I think you can say it's a great marketing tactic, but at this point, it is damaging to the psyche of the country.
Yeah, it is. But that's not their goal.
Not to mention, it is extremely reckless and irresponsible, because it's not just emotionally damaging our body politic, but it is actually wreaking actual physical havoc and economic devastation, because you look at how irresponsible the media was pushing that George Floyd narrative as a racial issue, and the country burned for 6 months.
So there's a direct correlation, but the media they're still reaping in whatever billions or money clickbait that they're getting to support, by and large, the Democrat Party.
And that's the thing. They won't say it. You know, just say what you're not. Don't come across like you're straight line and you're not biased.
There were two pairs of incidents I just want to compare if we have time. So the first was the Atlanta shooting and the Colorado shooting.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second thing, if we have time on it,
talk about V.P. Harris's niece.
Yeah, the hate crimes against the Asians. So, all right, with the Colorado shooting, essentially what happened is there were 10 individuals killed, including a police officer. Unfortunately, a gunman opened fire at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado.
And were they all white, the victims?
So that's the thing that was never reported is, so there was, as soon as somebody took a picture of the person appeared to look white or whatever, he's light-skinned. This is when the cops were arresting him. So all of these people, Twitter went crazy with all of these political individuals posting like, oh, of course they're doing due process for a white man. Of course, if a white man is in custody, or if a man is in custody, you can guess what color the shooter was, that type of thing. And Mina Harris, Kamala's niece, she had posted, and immediately or later deleted, the Atlanta shooting was not even a week ago. Violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. Then she took that down and she said, I deleted a previous tweet about the suspect in the Boulder shooting. I made an assumption based on his being taken into custody alive and the fact that the majority of mass shootings in the U.S. are carried out by white men.
Which is not true.
Right. One, statistically inaccurate. Two, where was her apology to white men?
Right.
And three, it's extremely more insulting because this actually was a hate crime against white men.
Well, wait a minute. So that's not true about
the
mass shooting?
No, it's not true that white people are about like 65% of the population, and it's about like 54% of mass shootings, and that statistic does not take into account any mass shootings that are drug or gang related, because that would make the percentage of black shooters higher, and they're trying to push the narrative.
They parse it basically. It's all parsed.
Right. And so it came out that this man was a Syrian American.
Surprised me too.
Was it what? I'm sorry, was it what?
So he's a Syrian American.
Syrian American,
originally from the Middle East. And some people said like, oh, I was reading the articles, and essentially he had claimed that like he had been a victim of bullying and stuff in the past, and some of if it was racial slurs or whatever. Okay, so that means he targeted white individuals. That is a white hate crime. The other thing is his family, like his brother, had stated that he was just mentally ill. He used to claim people were chasing him when no one was chasing him.
Most of these people are mentally ill.
Most of them are, right. So that is to compare now to the Atlanta shooting, because in the Atlanta shooting, the perpetrator was a white man. And let me just be clear, all of these attackers, they're all sick. They're disgusting, despicable.
They're all criminals. That's what they have in common.
They're criminals, and they should be locked away or worse. You know what I mean? This is not to say... The sad thing is they're both just as evil as one another. And the media tries to take advantage of one where the perpetrator is white to make it a white racism type of situation, and it's not. So in the Atlanta shooting, you have this guy, Robert Aaron Long. He was 21 years old. He's a white guy. He was part of some like super religious group that I guess condemned this sexual addiction that he had. Right? He's just like an ill-minded man. And so, like, I don't know if sexual fetishes are like can be considered racist or not. I don't know.
He had a sex addiction.
He thought he was taking out the places that provided his addiction. Yeah, his temptation.
Right. Why would he do that if he had a sex addiction?
Because he was trying to get rid of
the temptation.
So he was like, he wanted to kill everybody.
Get rid of the massage parlors because then I won't, because those were parlors that he had frequented.
Right.
Yes.
But
so
why
he
would
had two separate attacks.
Why would that make his sex addiction go massages?
Because
it was his temptation.
Because again, I'm sorry, it goes back to personal responsibility. You are not responsible for your own deficiencies or weaknesses. It's the massage parlor's fault for even tempting you.
But how does a massage tempt? I don't know.
They were massage parlors. They were sex trafficking parlors. He was getting a happy ending.
He thought they were.
Oh my God.
That's what those parlors were.
Anyways, this guy, he attacked these two different locations, young Asians massaging. Essentially, he murdered in the end 8 people. Right. 6 of the victims were Asian women. And
Can we be more specific? 6 of the victims, they were Korean and Chinese. Like, because people keep throwing away, like, I'm sorry, Kamala Harris is not Korean or Chinese. How she's speaking to those communities, I don't know.
Because she's Asian. She's
and then
Asian,
two of them, I believe, were Latino. And
one was white,
and one was Latino. Okay, and then the Latino was a man, and then the white was a lady.
I don't mean to be like, don't forget the white person, but just because we're on topic.
So this was what I didn't understand. Again, mass Twitter, right? Uproar. People are saying like white supremacy is the terrorism in our nation. White supremacy is killing. They said, some ladies quoted 8 Asians when it was not 8 Asians, it was 6 Asians.
They're erasing the identities of the other victims.
It's
and the white person doesn't matter at all.
Not at all.
So again, this particular shooting actually had nothing to do with race. This guy was just a freak. I mean, he was just a freak. It had nothing to do with race. But they're using the fact that
super freak.
They're using the fact that he is white and attacked a place where the individuals that died were majority Asian.
It had nothing to do with the race.
It had nothing to do with that.
He's going around killing the people that were giving him the happy ending.
Right. Look, it doesn't make it any less bad what happened. No. But again, the media is taking this situation where they can turn this into a racist narrative. And the sad thing is that you have, so in the Colorado and the Atlanta shooting, what do the people have in common? They're both mentally unstable. They're both mentally ill. So why is one racist and one not? Why is one a hate crime and one is not? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, so can I just point out a logical flaw in this narrative? Because, the default reaction whenever there's a shooting, and like you said, these tweets are coming out saying, oh, I saw the news and I immediately knew. It says the suspect was taken into custody, so therefore he must be white. Okay, but then juxtapose that with the narrative about mass incarceration and how black people are disproportionately being incarcerated. Well, if every black person is being murdered by the cops, then we wouldn't have a majority, or it's not a majority black, but a disproportionately black prison population if every black person that is being taken into custody is being killed. So I'm sorry, the narratives, they don't match.
None of Kind of makes sense.
It really doesn't.
But we really had.
Yeah. So first, of course, want to honor the victims because all these tragedies were equally horrific. I mean, when I think about like the people whose lives were lost, it makes me really sad. But even like extending into a lot of the Asian hate crimes, right? There were many attacks on Asians that were conducted by Black individuals. Those have not been headlined. The only ones that have been headlines are the ones where a white person attacked these individuals. And again, all those attackers, I mean, they should all be put away or worse.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well, we'll continue to.
that's the problem is the media narrative.
Yep, and we'll continue to look at this. I mean, you really laid it all out, though, especially showing the differences.
There's so many
it's
parallels just in those 4 cases.
And props to Giovanni for putting all those images together.
Thank you. I said a lot, I know.
All right, so we will move on to a local issue with Maryland Delegate Brenda Cham. On April 1st, racist social media comments were made by white political operative regarding Delegate Brenda Cham. The comments made by Renee Bergen, find her on Facebook, included references using the black pawn emoji as well as the phrase, "Yes, massa." Bergen recently served as a campaign manager for Democratic Councilwoman Tiara Burnett. Find her on Facebook. Delegate Cham responded by saying this: "I was honestly shocked when I read Ms. Bergen's comments. My shock quickly changed to a mix of anger and disappointment. I know people are going to disagree with me. That is not unexpected. But as many of my colleagues in Annapolis can tell you, I am no one's pawn. Every decision I make is my own. My skin color does not dictate my political affiliation, my ability to think for myself, or my worth as a human being. I would hope in the future Miss Bergen," again,
don't find her on Facebook.
with Renee Bergen, "would be more careful with her choice of words and refrain from trying to define what it means to be an African American, particularly since, to my knowledge, she is not one." It's well said, Delegate Cham. So just want to talk to you guys about this, and this is something that is personal to me as a Black conservative. You have, I was a Democrat for years and never experienced the type of, I've never experienced any racism from Republicans or in a political way as I have when I became a Black conservative.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's vile. It's just vicious.
It is.
And the thing is, it's from these white liberal and usually women.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what is, you're supposed to be saying you stand up for, Black people and you love Black people and everything systemic racism, yet you're going to call this woman, you're going to say, "Yes, massa"?
Because remember, there's a hierarchy. We talked about this before. So the hierarchy, it generally starts with your skin color will dictate what political or what box you belong in. And if you don't go to those boxes or you don't fit yourself into those boxes, then you must be castigated because the goal is to get you to conform.
And that is it. You're not conforming.
Exactly.
They want you to do what they want you to do. You're not fitting in the standard box.
They're immune to all of their rules.
Exactly.
But no one else.
Yes.
Yes. It is crazy. And the same thing happened to Candace Owens.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was sent a Klansman hood by a white Democratic operative in California, I believe, because of some statements that she made in her platform.
And what's so ironic about that is that the party that was actually a supporter and a sponsor of the KKK, of Jim Crow, is the same party that these bigots, like this, whatever her name is, Miss Bergen,
Renee Bergen.
That's the same party that she supports. The actual people who supported slavery wanted to keep it. We had a civil war over it, right? But these bigots like her are the ones, they go and support the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the sponsor, the supporter of the KKK and Jim Crow.
Back to what you were talking about earlier.
The Democratic Party was the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, the party of the KKK, the party that opposed the civil rights movement and the civil rights legislation, which was passed by Republican legislature.
Thank you.
And now they're the party that feels that they have carte blanche to denigrate and insult Black people who are thinking for themselves.
And the thing that really pisses me off is that you have these black Democrats who will sit by and let these people call you names, people who are supposed to know you.
And stand up for them
and they
too,
don't
and
say
justify
a
an excuse.
word.
Again, because the black Democrats, they don't stand by you, even if it's, let's say, a white person calling your name, because the goal is to conform you and to get you back into the party, the plantation, as we call it.
And it's exactly what Melik said earlier, Melik Abdul. He mentioned this. He said how we would say, if we would, if we give them an inch, we're willing to say, okay, you know what, compromise. But they could be wrong as two left shoes, and they will not admit to it. And they'll sit by and let people, question ethnicity of black conservatives. And let me tell you something, and I'll talk to the camera. If God came back tonight and said to me, Keena, I want to tell you, I will. If you want, when you wake up, I will grant you. You can wake up any race you want to be. What race would you be? What ethnicity? I would say bliggity, bliggity, bliggity black. Okay? This is about free thought. This is about diversity of thought. And this is why I like the conservative Republican Party, because we are about spreading individuality, liberty, and things like
Herman
that.
Cain's book, God rest his soul, his book was They Think You're Stupid. Right? And I think, I want to say Star Parker, I think it was Star Parker, her book was something about being bamboozled or something like that. This is what they want. When you can think for yourself, you are a threat. That is when you become a threat.
And it's a plantation mindset.
Yes.
And I know that I think like Brenda Cham and I know Nicole Bennett, they've been critical of like Candace Owens, where they use this expression of get off the plantation. And Melik mentioned that too, that we want to be careful of that, because we don't want to fall into the same trap of using these race baiting slurs that the Democrats and these white liberals are using. But I think that there's a difference. Well, but I think that there's a difference. I'm very specifically talking about the mindset of the white liberals and the Democrat Party.
And doing an ad hominem attack against these people.
Because there really is this mindset, this idea, and it's this arrogant hubris. It's this idea that we are so self-righteous.
We are morally
and because
superior.
we know, and our way is true, that everyone else must conform to our political dogma, that if you think for yourself that we have this authority, we have this power over the way that you think, and if you are engaging in wrong think, then we have every right as your moral superiors to insult you, to call you any kind of name, any kind of racial slur. Uncle Tom is like the last socially acceptable racial slur that white people are able to wield, and they wield it with relish. Those white racist liberals wield it like nothing else.
You know what's amazing?
Just like you said,
when you
the
were
black
talking
pawn.
about earlier with Mosby and the leaders of the beautiful struggle, right? Wasn't that their argument that they were so upset that these black individuals in power were like succumbing to the white forces around them? That is the Democrat Party.
Right?
That is only on the Democrat Party. That is not the
if you go, like you said, they are immune to their own rules or stipulations, then if we take them at their word, then the Democrat Party should be canceled.
Right. Why don't they cross the bridge?
But this insulting idea of denying to a black woman her own agency, her own independence of mind and of thought, because she disagrees with you.
Has the audacity.
That she disagrees with this white woman, that she's thinking for herself, and that she just happens to look, as a black woman, that she can look at that white liberal and say, you're wrong. Is just anathema to white liberals.
How dare?
If she had simply disagreed on something, we wouldn't care. She actually used racial slurs and somehow
and the symbol, the black pawn,
her own rules. So it really is sad.
It's time for it to stop. It really is. It's time for it to stop, because like I said, and it's hurtful. It's hurtful because you have people that may have known you for a long period of time, and they question your ethnicity, they question your character, your values, and it's very hurtful.
Funny though, I always find that, like, comparing the right from the left, and look, there are some people in the middle, and there are some right-leaning liberals, and I get along great with them. But I always find it funny how the party of the left is, like, all talk but no action. The party on the right is of action. Like the left is all about pandering to these different communities
and talking about your feelings
and talking about
conservatives give more and volunteer more hours and give more time than
that's the thing. Like, as a collective, we have done more for communities of color and all these different, and not that it's a race, but I'm just saying, like, we care about those issues.
Well, look at like the philanthropic activities that you mentioned of the Able Foundation that they were criticizing, and yet I was looking at the list of all of the grants that they've given to actual organizations.
It was like a stat like this.
To charter schools in Baltimore City, to internships for kids, to debate programs, to chess clubs.
Like, we act more on these things that we care about than people that constantly critique us for all for having our own individual thoughts.
And why do you think that? Why do we help? Why do we help?
It goes back to our values. Most conservatives, or a good proportion or majority of conservatives, have a religious system that they believe has a moral faculty to their lives. So that moral imperative, we have to give. We should give. We should help those who are less fortunate.
And
not only that, I was gonna say,
I'm not even religious, but I still
Yes, but Xandria, you believe that your moral compass resides with you and not with the government. And for the left, their religion is the government. The government is supposed to do everything. Therefore, I don't have to lift a finger personally because the government will come in and save you.
The religion says that we, the people, should be doing it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The reason I would say that a lot of conservatives assist and help out with people is because we don't want people to go to the government.
Exactly.
We believe that we help each other as a community. Same thing with the whole abortion argument. Whether people say, "Oh, well, you talk about them before they come out." Do you know how many conservatives help with adoption? They go about
adopting
themselves. It's we believe in helping one another, so you don't have to go to the government.
Government should be the last resort.
Exactly.
Government should be there to provide and to ensure an even playing field.
Right.
And that's it.
All right. That's it. Yeah. Well, that we will move on. I'm not sure. Do we have enough time for another topic? Okay. We do have we do have one more topic to discuss, so you can take it away, Hanalyn.
Well, we had discussed this in a different state a couple of months ago when Oregon was considering this the racial equity distribution of vaccines, and I tried to find information on whether or not that had actually passed, but I wasn't able to find. All I could find were just articles about the discussions that they were having, so I don't know what came of that. But now Vermont actually has done this. So the Vermont governor, who is Republican in name, he on April 1st, which talk about this tweet read like an April Fool's Day joke, but on April 1st, Governor Phil Scott announced on Twitter that if you or anyone in your household identifies as BIPOC, which is,
tell me again.
It's just this nauseating new
Tell me again
term.
what it means.
Black, Indigenous people of color.
Indigenous. Who did they leave out? Can they leave out anybody in that?
Right.
But
they do leave people out, but it's anybody not white.
Anyone not white, because it includes every other.
Right. If you are not white, why are they using this fancy word to disguise what they're trying to say?
Well, because it's a way. Yes, but it's a way of disguising. Yes, but it's a way of collectivizing all people who are not white, but who are of varying different ethnicities. Right? They are not a monolith. So it actually disguises, it conceals all of the different disparities that are going on between these different racial groups, which I'll get to in just a minute when I look at the data.
About which letters come first.
They were, because the Indigenous people, Native American activists were saying, well, we should be ahead of Black because we're here first. It always breaks down into these internecine wars.
But that's not racist. That's not racist.
But so he said, anyone who identifies, which I guess does that mean that Rachel Dolezal is
I can
eligible?
identify whatever I want.
Okay, so
that's what I don't even like.
If you or anyone in your household identifies as BIPOC, then all household members 16 or older can get the vaccine. For everyone else who are white, you have to wait until April 19th. If you're 16 and older.
Who has adopted children of a different ethnicity?
If anyone in your household. Anyone in your household
But what if
identifies.
you're an old white person?
No, so this is what happened in
Then you're
Vermont. They've
you said if
already
you are?
done.
Oh, wait, then you're last in line.
No. This is no.
You're still last in line.
They've already done the vaccinations. They've already opened them up to the elderly, right? Because that's the group that was most vulnerable. And now what the
No, I was
deputy?
saying, what about let's say a white couple adopted?
No, that
black
would mean
children?
someone is in their household
Okay.
that's BIPOC. Yeah. But now, so the deputy, so this is how they were originally distributing the vaccines. They were doing it on the basis of vulnerable groups, right? So the elderly were getting the vaccine first, regardless of what race you were. So the deputy health commissioner, Tracy Dolan, she said that for a while, the way that we were doing this was to prevent death and hospitalization, and we were successful. There was a report that just came out today that ranked Vermont as having the best COVID response,
Yeah, I heard
right?
that.
So she said for a while, the way we were doing this was to prevent death and hospitalization, and we were successful. But the approach is inequitable.
Oh, yeah.
In that, wait.
Preventing death is inequitable.
In that BIPOC communities are not as well representative in those age groups. Now, she also noted that the people in Vermont, the demographics, the way that they break down, people who are Black, Native American, Asian, they tend to be younger. The white population in Vermont skews much older. So therefore, the people who were getting the vaccines tended to be white because they were in the older age demographics. And she acknowledged that moving forward, as we open it up to lower and lower age brackets, then more Black people will be eligible to get the vaccine. But instead of allowing that to happen organically, they are now doing this solely on the basis of race.
Because it didn't look right on paper.
And this is the other thing that's so disturbing. We talk about the media narrative. So this is what's so disturbing about this, because this is not grounded. This is political correctness. This is social justice. It's politically correct. It is not scientifically or medically correct or ethically correct. Because when you look at the data, there is a claim that the health department in Vermont claims that they're prioritizing BIPOC because of higher infection and hospitalization rates. The Kaiser Health News actually repeats this claim, stating that BIPOC individuals are 2 times as likely as whites to be hospitalized. And then also the Vermont Department of Health said that the BIPOC population is at a higher risk for more serious outcomes, such as hospitalization. And yet when you link to the Vermont Department of Health, to the source of this data, when you link to it, the data says that 3% of cases among BIPOC Vermonters are hospitalized, which is far less than the 8% of white cases that are hospitalized. There are fewer than 6 people of color in the ICU. The rates are so low as to be statistically unrepresentative. So the data doesn't even support this rollout. The data does not support tranching this out on the basis of race. And what you are doing is you are saying, essentially, you are stopping the vaccine rollout. When you look at the data, right, the majority of people, it's like 94% of people in Vermont are white. The majority of people who have died from COVID, also by absolute numbers as well as by percentage of the population, are white. Black people in Vermont. Now, nationwide, there are places where Black people have died disproportionately. And usually it's because they have more pre-existing conditions. But in Vermont, Black people make up 1.36% of the population, and they've only been had a 1% death rate. And white people make up 94% of the population, and they make up 89% of the death rate. Asians are actually disproportionately represented in death. So Asians have died from COVID at 4 times the rate of Blacks.
Wow.
So if you really were saying we're concerned about getting the vaccine to the population that's dying at disproportionate rates, you would say Asians first, then whites, then Blacks. But they won't do that.
So let me ask you this.
Because it's dishonest.
So you're telling me that if I'm a white girl, Bethany.
Yeah.
And I have
Bethany from Vermont.
Right, Bethany from Vermont. I eat cheese. I have cheese all the time. I'm not lactose intolerant. And I have diabetes, and I'm overweight.
And you're white.
And I'm white.
Okay.
They would give it to a healthy Black person.
They have already tranched it out to people with pre-existing conditions.
So you would get a
now we're really at the tail end of this, where they were about to open it up to essentially
everybody.
16 and older, you can get the vaccine, but they said, wait,
what's going to happen, which is what's happening next week pretty much anyway for the whole nation.
Yeah, and they said, no, we need to do our virtue signaling moment. We need to have our moment in the social justice sun.
It's just to be in the media.
So they are
really, it's just to be
they are basically to get the vaccine out to less than 1% of the population, they're halting vaccine distribution for 94% of the population.
Yeah.
It's really sad because
that's the what is it called? The Democrat math.
Yeah, if they just let everything play out naturally, then the individuals of color or whatever would actually be served anyways.
Yes, and because this brings up an ethical issue of like, what are you going to do? Are you going to force black people to take the vaccine? Because we've already prioritized black people. They've had what they call BIPOC clinics.
And they're not running
for 2 weeks they've been doing this, where they've been setting up clinics in black communities, and they have only been giving the vaccine to black people in those clinics, and they've been lamenting the fact that the rates are still 13. There's still a 13% difference because the black people aren't choosing not to.
No. I did read that. They said that what's going on is they have white people going to these BIPOC clinics in blackface.
No. What? Wait, what? How is that? What? Wait, no, is that serious? Because I don't even know if that's serious or not.
She made that up. She made that up.
No, KJ.
Well, wait.
But if you're saying you can identify, as BIPOC.
Wait. I scheduled a doctor's appointment recently, and they asked me, "Do you identify as white, black?" I swear to
you should say all of the above.
What I identified as, ethnicity-wise and gender-wise. I expected maybe gender one. Not. Why would you ask me? Can I choose my own? Like
in Vermont, you can. Apparently, you can.
It's amazing.
No, you know why they're doing this though, right? Because they're trying to normalize gender. The gender stuff.
Yes.
Because gender, they're trying to change. It's like you can identify.
Construct.
So now, again, they try to come along with the ethnicity stuff, and they say, "Oh, now we all identify."
Now none of our data will ever be accurate.
Biology does not exist. You create your own reality. But yeah, I mean, this is not based in fact. This is medical Lysenkoism. It is putting a political agenda ahead of people's lives and ahead of actual, legitimate, scientific-based public policy.
And that's the part that makes me even more angry, because you have medical professionals who should know better, and they should be giving the vaccine based on medical reasons, health, preventive health, things like that, not based on someone's ethnicity or skin color or gender. And that's the propaganda. Leftism, like you said, it's a religion, and it has infiltrated every industry. It is a cult. Every industry in America.
Poisoned it.
And to your point, when you mentioned the vaccines that are not utilized, well, they have expiration dates. So if they're not being utilized, what are they going to do?
Waste.
For people that
get wasted.
And then I wouldn't be upset if they were like, hey, let's go based on socioeconomics, because that actually already includes
like a means test.
Right, like let's focus on this one group of people.
People that have poor health conditions. People that don't have access.
That's the medical aspect of it.
Guess what? If all of those people happen to be black, then yes, 100% serve them first. But why do you have to make everything about race? And why?
Because it works.
How do we have to like grain into their noggins that making everything about race is racist?
It is pernicious. And imagine this scenario. Imagine a white supremacist regime that looked at the data and said, you know what? White people make up the vast majority of the COVID deaths and hospitalizations.
Oh my God.
And white people also make up the highest, by percentage, the highest number in actual numbers.
In Vermont? What are you talking about?
In Vermont.
Okay.
In Vermont. Let's say the governor of Vermont, who's a racist Republican, right? To use the trope. Let's say the governor of Vermont is a white supremacist, and he looks at the data and he goes, you know what? We've got 94% of the COVID deaths are white people, and they make up a larger percentage based on population of the deaths and hospitalizations. So you know what? We are only going to, no black person, no Asian person, no Native American can get a vaccine until all white people.
BLM would go up there and burn the whole place down.
This is what you open it up to when you start doing things on the basis of
BLM of the governor's mansion.
Up to this.
Vermont is known for cheese, right?
Oh, that's what, I think it is. Wisconsin is too.
But it's just as evil.
Maybe it's syrup.
Maybe syrup. Maple syrup for Vermont.
Not cheese.
I said Wisconsin for cheese.
Oh my God.
I'm sure they have cheese in Vermont.
You're right, and it's
a white
really
state that
sad.
have
That's
cheese.
right.
It is maple syrup.
I thought, it is. It's not. So, audience, please, we want to retract that. Vermont is not known for cheese. It's known for syrup. I thought it was known for cheese and mayonnaise because it's predominantly white. So I was wrong about that. So we will end it with that.
I didn't know cheese and mayonnaise were like white things.
You ever see Hellman's commercial?
Lactose intolerant.
Mayonnaise sandwiches or something?
Yeah.
I am lactose intolerant.
Okay. All right. Well, we
I
are.
don't even like Miracle Whip.
Yeah, I like.
I love mayonnaise. I love mayonnaise on my
I
fries.
don't like mayonnaise. I don't like mayonnaise.
I have a girlfriend who does that.
Is she black?
No, she's black.
I know. Okay, good. Eugene will be very happy that we disproved a stereotype.
She-
I know he's like mad that we're talking about
I don't want to upset him, but it is true. I've seen it. People, you go to a white person's party and all they got mayonnaise sprayed out on everything.
Well, wait a minute.
I did my fries with mayo. I love it.
I know a lot of.
I'm joking.
You did the fries with mayo.
No, we didn't have
It's a Mexican dish. A Mexican dish with the corn and the mayonnaise. Is that?
that's good.
No, that is horrible.
That's too much.
I don't know. We used to put like
It's a Mexican or Tex-Mex.
corn in the Parmesan cheese.
Is that what it is? Then maybe it's
I mean, we
corn
would
in the
roll in Parmesan cheese.
Oh my
We don't
gosh,
put
it's horrible.
mayo.
All right, so
No,
we're
that's
ending it
Parmesan
for
cheese.
now. Let's wrap the show.
Our ethnic culinary delights.
Count your blessings.
People are always like, "Oh, you're stereotyping." There are some stereotypes that are based in reality, and different cultures are
Well,
known for
stereotypes.
different
Every
things.
stereotype has maybe
Has
some basis in reality,
and
which
when
is why
you're
it
It's not a negative
persists.
thing.
No.
Like,
And when you're not
there
being
are-
dogmatic about it and trying to
You just have
enact
fun.
policy based on it.
I can always, I don't have mind if it's a white person is eating mayonnaise on a bun with nothing else
I
on
think
it.
it's fair to be able to have the freedom to
cultures.
joke about
Yeah.
joke about things like this.
There are differences between cultures. It's
Yes,
a fact.
there are differences.
Well, since
They're
I'm over
celebrated.
time, I like to eat at Master's table.
Right. I always make fun of my husband because I say, he's from the West. He's
want
from the
the
West
goods from
Indies.
Master's
I say,
table,
you
and
gotta
that's
eat
what's up.
beans and rice.
Yeah, we eat a lot of beef.
All right, so we will wrap. Again, count your blessings and live a life of purpose. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Go home and eat some beans and rice.
Thank you.